But the enlightened person knows it's all just spectacle, for the sake of spectacle. That none of it means anything because nothing ever really happens. Kenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. The world we see that seems so insane is the result of a belief system that is not working. To perceive the world differently, we must be willing to change our belief system, let the past slip away, expand our sense of now, and dissolve the fear in our minds. William James. The difference between regular folk and enlightened folk is that when a regular person's head catches on fire, they get all frantic and hysterical and sucked into the drama of the moment, whereas we, the enlightened elite, take the whole head-on-fire thing in stride. It's just what appears to be happening in the eternal now, we know, not like it's real or anything. We watch in haughty disdain as the unenlightened run around with buckets of water and fire extinguishers, with salves and ointments and unguents, with ambulances and morphine and reconstructive surgeries, all because they don't understand that this is it. There is only this, and this is all there is. Or, as one non-dual luminary put it, this is this. In truth, nothing is really happening. It's all just what appears in the now. So even when your head is on fire, all you can do is laugh. Head on fire is just one scenario in which the unenlightened get bent out of shape. They forget this is just a stage, and they are just actors, so they take pain, sickness, suffering and loss very personally. Crime victim, accident victim, poverty victim, torture victim, disaster victim and war victim are examples of character arcs the unawake are unable to transcend. When being tortured by an enemy soldier, for instance, unenlightened people like to wiggle around and complain a lot, but the enlightened person knows it's all just spectacle, for the sake of spectacle. That none of it means anything because nothing ever really happens, or it just appears to happen, or it's just happening in the now, something like that. What's the point of living in a permanent state of bliss, love and compassion if you're just gonna let every goon with a drill and no dental degree rain on your parade? Not that the enlightened person enjoys pain or suffering, but that they rise above such trifling concerns. That's why being enlightened is so awesome. You don't get flustered and whiny anytime some dickweed hooks you up to a truck battery. Speaking as one of the ruling super elite, I can tell you that if I woke up tomorrow, not in my cozy cabin but in a burn ward or a prison cell, or in a wheelchair under a bridge, I wouldn't even blink. If that's how the story goes, that's how I go, laughing all the way. That's the enlightened perspective, and there's nothing spiritually retarded about it, as I can assure you while sitting in a comfortable chair, warm and well-fed, away from the things of man and above the cares of a world I'm in, but not of. Maybe at this exact moment I'm not wearing an ugly but snuggly sweater my grandmother sent me for Christmas. But that's only because I don't have a grandmother to send me a sweater, or the sweater she would have sent. The point is that I could be wearing a sweater that my could-be grandmother could have sent, and that makes all the difference. See what I'm saying? Well, if you don't see, try harder, and when you do see, you'll be enlightened too. Not as enlightened as me, because I have a really big head start, but pretty enlightened, more than you are now. Grandmother, ugly sweater, enlightened. You have all the pieces, you just have to put them together. Imagine how in the moment you'll be when you get stuck in a blizzard and have to urinate on your feet for warmth, and then you die anyway. Someday you'll look back and laugh, but why wait? Laugh now as your feet turn to ice, and you write your final farewell on the back of a receipt with frozen lipstick. Of course, in this scenario, you probably won't look back and laugh because you'll be super dead, but I think we understand each other. I haven't had to watch any of my children die in a cancer ward or a burn ward, but if I did, I'd be okay with it because I know it's all just appearance, like a sad movie. When the movie is over, you wipe away the tear and go watch a screwball comedy to take away the pain. I would comfort my dying children by reminding them that nothing is really happening, and their suffering is just an illusion in the eternal now. I think they'd really take a lot of comfort from that, as we sat and watched their time run out. In fact, if I were more civic-minded, I'd visit hospitals and hospices and remind the sick and dying that everything is just fine, that suffering is all in the mind. This too shall pass, I'd remind them. It's not real, it's just appearance. Pain is just an illusion, so let's turn those frowns upside down. Who's with me? Here's an amusing thought. Though not likely, it's technically possible that you will set the all-time record for human suffering, that you, your name here, will suffer more than anyone ever has, as recorded in the Akashic Book of World Records. There's still time. Just by being alive, you're still eligible to win the worst suffering ever trophy. Somebody else has that honor now, and they probably didn't see it coming. They were probably just stumbling through life when, bam! One little twist of fate, and they're dying the most terrible death ever. Life is funny. As a statistical probability, you won't die the worst death ever. But as long as you're still alive, you're still in the running. As nice as your life has been up till now, it can still take a sharp turn for the worse. And that's when having the enlightened perspective really comes in handy. All that suffering might sound like a really big deal to the sleeping mind, but not when you're awake and above all this dream state folly. This is where all those hours spent watching non-duality teacher videos really pay off. To see the blind and bloody soldier with foul hand defile the locks of your shrill shrieking daughters, your fathers taken by the silver beards and their most reverend heads dashed to the walls, your naked infants spitted upon pikes, while the mad mothers with their howls confused do break the clouds. Shakespeare, Henry V, edited. Wow, that sounds pretty bad, right? But is it really bad? Or is it just empty spectacle? Drama for the sake of drama. Shrill shrieking daughters and spitted infants are 3D reality to the ignorant and 2D cinema to the awake. When you withdraw your emotional investment, the theatrical impact of the moment collapses. Maybe if you had achieved abiding non-dual awareness, instead of playing video games and feeding your social media addiction, your knickers wouldn't be so easily twisted. Or maybe you think all this terrible stuff won't happen to you in the future, because it never happened to you in the pasture. Life might turn on a dime for other people, those less suffering averse than yourself. But you're above all that. That suffering stuff is just for other people, unspiritual people. You'd rather not suffer at all, but if you must, you prefer the pain-free variety. The Buddhist version doesn't sound so bad. Frankly, I'm not totally sure that I'm totally enlightened in this sense. I'm not very sweet-natured, for instance. I'm not a big forgiver or cheek-turner. I'm from the eyes for an eye school of bliss, love and compassion. Why not? It's all just empty spectacle, drama for the sake of drama. The reason I wouldn't shoot a home invader and hang their body from the nearest lamppost as a warning to others is because the nearest lamppost is like 5 miles away. It's mostly downhill, sure, but it's still a 10-mile round trip on rough roads. When you live in the mountains, you learn to consolidate errands when you can. I guess my point, pretending I have one, is that into every life a little rain must fall, and probably not according to a convenient schedule. War, crime, injustice, accidents, space rocks, sun flares, health issues, all sorts of stuff can go wrong out of the blue at the drop of a hat. Integration with your environment is a big help in this regard, but shit can go sideways in a flash, and the physics of an iceberg collision or the chemistry of a snake bite doesn't care if you're an adult or not. Every day is anything can happen day for everyone. My advice, as ever, is get thee to adulthood. I've seen a lot of faux enlightened folk who come into tricky times and try to stretch their bargain bin philosophy to encompass their new circumstances. The attempt can be sadly embarrassing, but also poignantly revealing. Any spiritual dabbler or sunshine seeker can talk a good game when the fish are jumping and the living is easy. But it's when things turn south that our worldview is put to the test. That's when cracks appear and foundations crumble. I can talk a good game too, but I have a very low threshold for suffering. I'm what you'd call pain intolerant. If I get a splinter, I pound my little fists. If I run out of hot water in the shower, I stamp my little feet. If I burn my mouth on pizza cheese, I call my lawyer. The slightest cuticle misadventure can cast me into the deepest funk. Adulthood helps me avoid these mini traumas, but it doesn't rule them out. I asked my dentist about getting a fake tooth full of cyanide, so if I ever got in a tight corner, I could just say, "Adios muchachos," and bite down hard. He said I had to go to a CIA dentist for that, and I kinda let it go, but the thinking is good. It wouldn't work if everyone had one. Then the bad guy would just bop you on the head and remove it before you woke up. But until market saturation was reached, it would be comforting to have. It might even eliminate teeth grinders from the gene pool. Friend Lisa once said to me, regarding some unpleasantness, that it must be nice that I could be so philosophical about it, to which I replied, In the sense you mean, I'm philosophical about everything. That's true. It's not that I transcend pain or dismiss it for lack of substance. It's that I know where I am and what the rules are. I can leave whenever I want, but if I stay, I have to play by the rules. Because I'm awake in the dream state, I know a few things about navigating in this environment, but that's just standard adulthood stuff. Being awake in or from the dream state doesn't serve to ward off dire misfortune, only to steer clear of it. I can generally keep my fortune pretty agreeable, but life can turn on a dime and I never forget it. If you're following someone who has what you want in the elevation of perspective department, watch them when the going gets tough to see how they hold up. You don't have to wait for structural collapse, just watch for cracks to appear and see how they apply cosmetic repairs to a broke-ass worldview. No dime store belief system or one-size-fits-all philosophy can stand up to severe adversity. We hear about saints who refuse to renounce their belief on rack and flame, and that's impressive if true, but it's not emotional energy we're looking for, but structural integrity. When a monk pours gas on himself and lights a match to protest this or that, is it a testament to their worldview or an indictment of it? I'd renounce my lineage back to Adam before the little torture guy unrolled his little torture kit. Had a toothache once, thought I was gonna die. So I'm not waiting for the guy who loves his job to prove his point. I accidentally waterboarded myself once, and I'm not going through that again. Okay, where were we? Oh yeah, suffering. It's bad. The only way to make dying in a burning house better is to avoid it altogether. That's where this adult thing really comes in handy. Shit still happens. You're in life and you live. But who knows about all the shit that doesn't happen? Maybe the shit that does happen isn't really shit. Maybe it's a blessing we have yet to see rightly. That's certainly been my experience. Nothing in the dream state is true, but it's still pretty real. And as long as you're here, shit can happen, and probably not on a convenient timetable. Tomorrow is promised to no one, but if past results are indicative of future performance, you won't die by the end of this sentence. See? Whatever the question, adulthood is the answer. Whatever the problem, adulthood is the solution. Human adulthood is the integrated state, which doesn't mean you and your environment become one. It means you shuffle off the egoic coil and realize they were one all along. As an additional bonus, you can see who still has some shuffling to do, and maybe stop taking their advice about your path. That's my advice anyway. The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank you. Abandon false ideas, that is all. There is no need of true ideas, there aren't any. Nisargadatta. Zen is dead. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. Alan Watts. I've barely given Zen a thought in decades, and not much when I did. It's almost completely outside my interest. I might once have assumed that Zen and Advaita were kinda cousins, but I no longer do. I don't even think Zen is worth writing about now. And upon further reflection, I agree with myself on that point. Zen is not worth writing about, but the art of seduction and science of delusion are worth writing about. That means Maya, and Maya is always a valuable subject of study, because she's the only thing standing between you and your awakening. Maya is misleading, diverting and deceiving you, not because she's malicious or devious, but because she's an aspect of yourself that wants desperately for you not to screw up a nice arrangement. Sewer, prison, palace, theater, matrix, holodeck, video game. Whatever you care to call it, her job is to keep you in it. Maya is the good mother who wants to indulge your childish urges while keeping you safe from harm. She is not the goddess of delusion. She is the intelligence of fear, your fear. And she will go to unimaginable lengths to protect you from yourself. Strictly speaking, Zen and Advaita are both about waking up from the dream state, not in it. But adulthood is what everyone everywhere everyone really wants. Enlightenment is just a bit of juvenile overreach. Zen will get you to adulthood supposedly, but it will take a lot more work, because in addition to all your personal bullshit that must be eradicated and overcome, Zen will provide virtually another mountain's worth. Non-duality doesn't add that extra helping of bullshit, which means a lot less work for you. The energy thus saved, not misspent, will then be applied to vertical, not horizontal progress. Outbound, not earthbound. When I say Zen is dead, I mean like a car is dead. It doesn't run, it doesn't go. It's a non-operating vehicle, good only for playtime and shelter. If an empty shell is all you're looking for, fine. Crawl in there with the no-go folk and huddle together and reinforce each other's delusion of progress. Why not? It's certainly a lot easier than making actual progress. You get all the benefits of a vehicle with none of the bother of motion. Thinking is a vehicle, just like Zen and meditation and ayahuasca and sensory deprivation tanks are vehicles. Except thinking will actually get you somewhere, and others will just feed the fantasy. Zen is not what we do to wake up, but to stay asleep. No one from the wonderful world of Zen would agree with me on that, because Zen, as part of its Mayan agenda, supplies adherents with inaccurate maps of the spiritual terrain. No one ever knows where they really are, or where they're really going, so they can't tell if they're just begun or nearly done. That's a pretty sweet solution. The warden doesn't have to abolish the prison escape club, just set out the wrong maps for them to steal. Now they can spend the next few decades digging their little holes with their little spoons and nobody goes anywhere, and everyone's just fine with that. I might be a little wrong, but not a lot. Today's Zen bears almost no resemblance to the Zen I remember from my greener days, and it didn't knock my socks off then. I don't see a difference between Zen and any other sickly sweet candy-coated offering in the spiritual carnival. From what I can tell, it's been fully deboned, and nothing is left but talk therapy and social agendas, compassion and happiness, and a litany of emotional secondary objectives that no serious person would give a second thought. You don't have time or energy for all that fluff and excess when you're engaged in the tricky business of self-annihilation. Afterward, if there is an afterward, and if you're still so inclined, you can dive into the New Age buffet and get some of that love, bliss and compassion everyone raves about. But for now, we're on bread and water rations. The journey of awakening by any name is not a group tour but a solo trek. Any one person who comes to hate their full of shitness can, in theory, rise up against the devious machinations of delusion and initiate real change, the likes of which Zen doesn't have words or a map for. Zen is just another path of abdication, and there's no shortage of those in the spiritual marketplace. Zen just has a super cool vibe. As far as I can tell, Zen is about bypassing your thinking mind. That might seem wrong in the forest, but it's right from above. All that koan stuff looks like thought, but it's really anti-thought. Koans are just another way to distract your mind and keep it from thinking. But what's so bad about thinking? What's wrong with logic and reason, with lucidity and clear seeing? Who made thinking the bad guy in all this? I'll give you one guess. Reason is your superpower, your only chance to get up, out and away. No progress can be made other than by reason of reason. That's why it's rejected, renounced, reviled and endlessly shat upon, precisely because it does work. Thinking is the only thing that can work. If Zen worked, you wouldn't be allowed anywhere near it. But like everything else in Maya's spiritual madhouse, it's utterly useless, so you're welcome to it. It's for this same reason that we don't see any Mayan pushback on philosophy or religion. They pose no threat, so no energy is wasted on undermining them. Non-duality works like a Swiss watch, which is why it had to be infiltrated and converted to something puny and pathetic, which for anyone keeping score, it has. Thought is the bull in the dream state china shop. How many Zen loyalists might read my argument and reassess their allegiance? None out of 1,000, I assume. They are committed to a path for reasons other than upward and outward progress. A person of Zen can sit facing a wall while chewing on a koan for decades and never take a single step forward, because that's the unwritten deal they made when they signed up. A sincere seeker, on the other hand, is nimble and adaptable and can turn on a dime to go where the demands of the terrain take them. Every step is a whole new journey, every battle its own war. You don't tell this mountain what your path is, this mountain tells you. Believe what you want, but serious people don't believe obvious bullshit, and that's where your indwelling power of reason comes into play. We are all in the same dark forest of illusion, and none of our physical senses or modes of navigation can be trusted to take us a single step in the right direction. The only thing that can get us out of this mess is our power of reason, and that's why Maya is so fiercely devoted to steering us away from it. Reason and the illusion of selfhood cannot coexist. Boil this pair of polar opposites down to emotional essence, hatred of false self and fear of no self, and let them duke it out. Job 1 is always getting to and through second stage birth, the transition to human adulthood, without which nothing else makes any difference. After that, you can do whatever you want or whatever you must, whatever your authentic pattern indicates or dictates. But until then, you're in an in-between state, a holding pattern, the virtual womb of a protective juvenile sheath. You missed your turn long ago, so it's either turn back or never get anywhere. Serious people don't sit around with their eyes closed and pretend they're making progress. They make progress by fighting for every inch as if their life depended on it, because it does. Your real life is out there somewhere, waiting for you to emerge, to come find it, to reunite with your authentic self. Belated second stage birth is hard enough as it is. Why make it harder? Once you realize that you're asleep in a dream, what wouldn't you do or give or destroy to wake up? What else would matter? Waking up does not involve the dissolution of self. It is the dissolution of self. You are all that stands between you and your rightful human development. You are Maya, and she is you. The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit Wisefool. Wrong Ass Mountain. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. None are so hopelessly enslaved as those who falsely believe they are free. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Revisit your assumptions. That might not sound like the most important piece of advice anyone could ever give or receive, but after decades of trying to communicate across this invisible chasm, I have concluded that it really, really is. Revisit and challenge your assumptions with extreme prejudice before anything else, or there's no point in anything else. The one who has awakened has revisited their assumptions, and the one who has not, has not. The first step in revisiting assumptions is figuring out what those assumptions are, and that might not be the walk in the park it sounds like. Assumptions run deep, they're foundational, they are who we are. People don't change, and this is why. The only change available to us is through the process of death and rebirth. It's a lot easier to just settle in and go with the flow. If you remain attached to your false assumptions, they will do you wrong, and you can never make it right. Failure is baked in. You are foiled from the start. The game was lost before it began. You can become the world's foremost spiritual scholar, or respected sage or solver of koans, or writer of haiku or mystic poetry, and never get one step closer to awakening in or from the dream state than you are right now. You can even achieve recognition as an upper echelon enlightened being in the eyes of the eyes-closed masses, as many do. But none of that makes any difference to your authentic state. Our complete and utter failure to challenge our assumptions is why the search for the one thing that can never be lost is the greatest failure in the history of man. Hat tip, Maya. Imagine a mountain with a single path upward. In one sense, there are as many paths as there are those to climb them, but in another sense, there's only one path, and it's the same for everyone. The assumption we must question as we climb is not whether we're on the right or wrong path, but whether we're on the right or wrong mountain. You might feel highly confident that you're on the right mountain because it's the one with every seeker from every corner of the spiritual marketplace crowding its slopes. But shocker, they're all wrong. They're all on the wrong ass mountain, so they're all wrong about everything all the time, which is actually how they like it. No one is doing it to them, they're doing it to themselves, meaning they could fix it if they wanted to, but they don't. It doesn't matter if they ascend or go into the light, or find bliss or win the lottery. They're on the wrong ass mountain, so the rest is just killing time. They liked the smell of ass, so they followed the crowd and went exactly where Maya wanted them to go. They can't get where they want from where they are, and it's easier to change what they want than where they're going. Their assumption that this is the right mountain is unshakable, so their failure is inevitable. You and I at JedVaita may be the last holdouts. We merry few have formed our little pocket of resistance, and we're fighting the good fight. But the decisive question is always the same. Who wants to go where this road really leads? Who wants to pay such a toll? Who wants to trade the illusion of everything for the reality of nothing? These are questions you should be asking yourself. If you understood these questions, you wouldn't hesitate. But do you? Even the transition to adulthood, which should have been achieved without overly undue hardship at 12 or 13, requires a state of hot-burning, hatred-fueled mania when attempted belatedly. Well worth it, a bargain at any price, but totally disproportionate to what nature had planned for you. I hate to drag the poor caterpillars into it again, but imagine you, little bug, was supposed to get to the cocoon place at a certain time, but you got tied up in traffic. Now it's much later, and you're hanging out with all your stuck-as caterpillar friends and family, when suddenly you're hit by a do-or-die butterfly or death urge that rewrites your entire life in a single instant. Well, shit. What you gonna do? Seriously. There's no one to call, no one to help you, no one who understands what all this butterfly bullshit is all about, or why you believe such nonsense, or why you're ready to throw your life away for it. Those who say they know may or may not. How do you know? There's no structure in place, no organization or group to join, no DIY manual to buy, just you and your burning madness to become a butterfly, or die trying. Fine, nice, good for you. If nothing else, you've at least found purpose and meaning in life. Now what? You remember that cocoon thing you were too late for, so that's where you start. But what do you, a lowly caterpillar, know about cocoons? It has something to do with being wrapped up or something, right? That's all you know, so you go out and find a way to get yourself wrapped up. You hook up with some other wacky cocooners and join the march of the butterfly-bound caterpillars. Maybe you find an abandoned spider's web, so you crawl in and wrap yourself up and wait for the major upgrade to occur. But what you've unwittingly done is crawled into the wrong-ass solution, so you've effectively shot your wad. Either you wait forever in your abandoned web, or the web wasn't abandoned, and the spider injects you with a paralytic and sucks out your fluids. Either way, game over. The only hope you have is not to believe or trust or join or follow, but to think. Now more than ever, your indwelling power of reason must be called upon and ignited. Not that thinking is so sure to succeed, but that anything else is so sure to fail. If you don't know thinking is an option, and how would you? Then you might just take your best guess and rely on the power of your conviction to muscle you through years of failure. But the fact is that many brave, intelligent, sincere caterpillars before you have followed the same road and ended the same way. If you settle on the wrong-ass solution, there's no hope. You have to play a better game. At this point, imagined reader, one of two things can happen. Either you see what I'm saying or you don't. If you don't, you keep doing what you're doing and nothing changes but the time on the clock. If you do see what I'm saying, one of two things can happen. You keep going anyway because you're more into seeking than finding, or you cuss up a storm and turn around and start looking for the right-ass mountain before the clock runs out. It's taken you a lot of time and energy to get where you are, so to understand and accept the fact that you've been going the wrong way since you were 12 is a big fucking deal, and to retrace your steps and start from scratch is bigger. Most seekers never see, some see and stay, a few see and turn back. This is where you find out which one you are. Non-duality is just the part after you turn back and before you get back. Once the getting back part is behind you, the non-duality part is over, and the getting started part begins. Non-duality is all about getting back to the starting point. It's not so much a path as a drastic course correction, the righting of a grievous miscalculation, and a commitment to truth at any price. Butterfly or death. This grand reset event is the second major milestone of awakening. The first being those first few inches that raised you above the herd and set you forever apart. The third will be when you're standing at the lip of the volcano, but we can worry about that when you get there. For now, congrats on making it to the turnaround, and if you do, on turning around. If you have experienced the initial non-dual insight, you are perfectly able to see all this for yourself. It all makes perfect sense and is perfectly accessible to reason, so don't listen to anyone who tells you otherwise, or that you have to trust or believe or join. You don't. Non-duality is strictly reason-based, and nothing else is. If there was another path of reason, it might have a different name, but would be otherwise indistinguishable from non-duality. Non-duality is full of obstacles, but devoid of choices. You are never asked to decide between options, only whether to take the next step or not, which is never really a choice either. Obviously, spiritual seekers, by whatever name, would argue, not wrongly, that I'm an idiot, and not rightly that their path is the exception, the one that really works, that rolling themselves in Maya's web is how everyone does it, so it must be right. But this is a bottom-line, results-based business, and if you can't put up, you have to shut up. They might put hundreds of super-enlightened folks on display, but when you open your eyes and learn to see, a very different picture emerges. You are in the matrix. No matter how sincere, dedicated and intelligent you are, you can't get to the top of Everest by climbing K2. You must first realize that you're on the wrong mountain, then reverse course, which means committing to the laborious task of going all the way down, finding the right mountain, and going all the way up. This second stage birth would have been challenging enough at the appropriate age in a supportive society and a conducive environment, and here you are, well past the appropriate age in a hostile society and a non-conducive environment. Maya's web looks pretty good compared to that. What are the diabolical dynamics and Mayan machinations behind the wrong-ass mountain scheme? The answer is simple. Who cares? It's totally and completely irrelevant. Are you trying to succeed in awakening or write a thesis on failure? This is your pivot point. Your time and fuel are running out, and you've realized very late that you've made a catastrophic blunder. On the bright side, however, you still have some time and some fuel, and you've realized your error and altered your course. What's more, unlike every lost and blind seeker since the dawn of man, you now have a clear idea of where to go, how to get there, and what to do there. Failure is still nearly certain, but success just got a whole lot closer. For the first time, you're in the right game. You have a fighting chance. No one on the wrong mountain has any chance, and because they think they're on the right mountain, they never will. That's how Maya works. She can't derail us herself, she must convince us to derail ourselves. Satisfy your curiosity on this matter, but I suggest you don't waste a lot of time on it. The clock is ticking and the game is afoot. The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank
The Joy of Not Dying. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Junior McFeely. I am not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Woody Allen. I often hear how wonderful it would be if we could all live to be 150 or 800 years old, or better yet, just never die, but what I never hear is why. What would be so wonderful about it? What would you do with all those extra decades or centuries? Play more video games? Spend more time on social media? Finally take that 50-year cruise you've been putting off? Watch more celebrity dance shows? Take your skincare to the next level? Learn Spanish or fly fishing or clarinet? Have thousands of grand spawn? In such a world, change of heart suicide kits would be sold in every pharmacy between pregnancy tests and adult undergarments, with special offers like on socks, buy 3 get 1 free. Fun for the whole family! By the time you pass the age of 100, you might want to hang around, but no one else wants you to, just as you wouldn't want an undying class of super elders you have to call on birthdays and holidays. Your online ancestry database would become your new contact list. What's an appropriate gift for a 500-year-old 20th generation great-grandmother? Whatever it was, I'd be sure to cough on it before sending it. Fear of death makes us crave longevity and immortality. but 17 seconds of semi-serious reflection would show us how seriously nuts that is. This human dream state scenario we seem to find ourselves in is a very limited potential, and there's really nothing you can do to improve it. 60 to 80 years, more or less, is all this form factor is good for. You don't want to be burdened by old people and you don't want to be a burden on the young, so nature has provided a very tidy solution, death, and that's really the best you can hope for. There was never a better offer on the table. Heaven and reincarnation are part of the same swindle. All we want in our prison cells is the illusion of freedom. As long as the walls look like meadows or pasture or life everlasting instead of cinder block or wireframe, we're adequately not discontent. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to blur the lines. The nice thing about heaven and reincarnation is that they both double as herd control mechanisms. If you want a happy future, you have to be good in the present. What does good mean? It means stay in your lane. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Don't jostle your surrounding herd mates. Another dull-witted fantasy we fall for in the sleeping dream state is that we can get off planet and discover new worlds, Moon, Mars, Romulus, etc. This is really the same as a longevity immortality daydream. The simple fact is that you're in a scary situation and while you can't make it better, you can trick yourself into thinking it's other than it is. The hope that death, or even change, can be avoided by planet hopping or escaping to a space station or by living forever in life or after death is closer to some people's real religion than wherever they spend their Sunday mornings. These edge-softening border-erasing delusions allow us to remain in a snuggly sleep state, which is fine, all the thoughts of sheep are sheep. These delusions are also the enemy of awakening, which may not be fine, depending how you feel about your sheephood. The obvious reality of our situation is that life is meaningless, nothing you do matters and you're going to die. You can't change those terms but you can pretend you found a magic loophole. Space, heaven, altered states, reincarnation, consciousness evolution, 72 virgins, what's in your afterlife dream state? Actually, we are immortal, but it's more of a technicality than a better deal. The truth of you exists outside of time, so actual non-existence is out of the question. I'm guessing the immortality dreamed of by the drop of water is not ocean reunification, but it is what it is. You may not like it, but you'll not like it a lot less after you're dead, so that's something to look forward to. I guess every cloud really does have a silver lining. Outer space is like that green wireframe in the 13th floor after we crashed through the barrier and reached the end of the world. That green wireframe is the edge of the stage where you get bounced back as if by the transparent walls of a bouncy castle, but just because the stage is finite doesn't mean the dramatic potential is. What can't be portrayed in a theater that can contain Star Wars and Middle-earth in the Barbie-verse? What can't be dreamt? What can't be depicted on stage or screen? We can't travel to space or the future or the past, but the fantasy is easily within reach. It's not a matter of time or technology or processing power, it's a matter of dramatic dream state production. The natural lifespan of the human body might be 74 years, but what about a brain in a vat? Who knows, maybe thousands of years, maybe unlimited or until the sun goes supernova, whichever comes first. Or maybe there is no sun, no vat and no brain, just the drama. Once we wire your brain into the mainframe, how many lives could you live at once, and/or at what speed? Maybe you could live one life an hour, or 174-year lifetimes at once, or maybe both. Maybe that's what you're doing right now, unless you can prove you aren't, which you can't. Does this scenario satisfy your fear of mortality or lust for immortality? Or does a lack of conscious awareness of your unboundedness weaken the broth? The best thing we can do in our awakening process is turn on the house lights and see that we're sitting in a theater with very specific dimensions that don't really exist in terms of time and space, but in terms of dramatic potential. The illusion is that the dream state universe extends forever in all directions, the reality is that it ends where your sightlines end. The quest for unlimited time or space is a reminder that, just because it can be imagined and depicted, doesn't mean it can be done, or should. Fantasy serves a purpose even when never fulfilled. People are too smart as it is, but the magic of the fine-tuned 24:1 heart-mind imbalance seems sufficient to prevent accidental awakenings. Being super smart sounds good like heaven, or being king or an all-you-can-eat buffet sounds good, but after a few minutes we'd be calling Mr. Wizard to get us out of there. Drizzle drazzle druzzle drum, time for this one to come home. It's among the greatest wonders of the sleeping dream state that people can be so smart and yet so dumb. The truth of not to is just sitting out in the open where anyone can bust their toe on it. Can smart people not figure it out, or do they not want to figure it out, or are they configured not to figure it out? I don't know how they do it, I just find it a remarkable tribute to Maya, the intelligence of fear, that they do. The art of misdirection is subtle. The key is only to misdirect to the least possible degree. The best lies are the most true. That's it, the end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Junior McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank you! Don't try to add more years to your life. Better add more life to your years. Blaise Pascal.
Logos Logo, article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. We are the children of children and we live as we are shown. Waponi Chief, Joe vs. the Volcano, 1990. In the movie Joe vs. the Volcano, this is the logo of the company Joe Banks works for. A company which makes, among other medical marvels, artificial testicles. A pretty clear metaphor for neutered Joe during his post-fireman/pre-adult brain cloud stage, as well as for neutered, effete, spirit-broken spiritual seekers in general, and sunshine non-dualists in particular. According to Wikipedia, the film features a lightning bolt-like symbol as a recurring motif, first appearing both in the logo of American Panoscope, the fictional company at which Joe is initially employed, and as the shape of the pathway that leads to the American Panoscope factory. The pattern also appears as a crack in a wall of Joe's apartment, in the lightning bolt that strikes and sinks the Tweedledee, and in the procession of the Waponis to the top of the volcano. Note the graphic element of the logo, a pyramid rent by an upward-traveling bolt of lightning, or a mountain bisected by a jagged trail, or a fractured highway, or a sadomasochistic sex toy. It also symbolizes the journey of awakening, one part of it anyway, the up-the-slope part. My idea of the ideal image or logo or icon or emoji for non-duality is the cancelled yin-yang symbol shown below, the no sign atop the sign of duality. The yin-yang symbol represents all that is false, the dream state. So in a single stroke we're able to represent the opposite, the truth. How we could improve on that, I don't know. What we're doing here is taking a few minutes to logoize non-duality. Not that any conclusions we arrive at will be embraced by the decentralized community, but just for the purposes of reviewing our options and seeing what's best, at least by my lights. In the end, not surprisingly, I'll choose the cancelled yin-yang symbol, but the thought process of getting there has its sights to see. I'm just playing with ideas, brainstorming, spitballing. No wrong answers, right? Maybe we're making too much of a simple graphic, but so what? Let's enjoy the process. Who says self-annihilation can't be fun? Speaking of self-annihilation, I wonder if there's a juicy symbol in there somewhere. I'm not coming up with anything, but you might. No self is as difficult to represent graphically as the shoreless sea or empty space, but there's no harm in trying. The pyramid bolt image is a smidge too masculine, in contrast to modern spirituality, which is way too feminine. Masculine-feminine balance might be desirable, but emasculation is not. Pacifism, compassion, and Christ-like cheek-turning have no place here. I don't know if men or women enjoy greater success in achieving adulthood, but it's definitely close. In any event, being soft and sweet, tolerant and accepting, compassionate and inclusive will get you absolutely nowhere. This is war, and pretending otherwise is why we almost invariably lose. Symbolically speaking, a little harshness is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a harsh business. What do other major spiritual symbols look like? Christianity's cross is very clean and simple, but graphically deficient. Had Jesus died by lethal injection, we'd see hypodermic needles atop buildings and hanging from necks. What does Buddhism have? Lotus, swastika, yin-yang? Islam has the star and crescent. Judaism has the Star of David. Zen has the cool but dopey paintbrush circle. The UN has the flat earth map. Watchmen have the smiley face with blood drop. And Nike has their wonderful dynamic, just do it swoosh. Once you make it to the big leagues, you gotta have a tight logo. All the big religions have their own easily identifiable, instantly recognizable symbols. But what do we more serious people have? A swastika? Have fun with that tattooed on your third eye. A triquetra? We could say it represents Brahman Atman Maya, or Brahma Vishnu Shiva, or Patris Filii Spiritus Sancti. But of what good is a tripartite symbol for non-duality? How does 3 represent not 2? The American Panoscope logo can be viewed as the path up a volcano, as it literally is on Waponi Woo. Viewed as lightning, the bolt is an obvious oversimplification. Real lightning wouldn't make 3 zigs and 2 zags. It would zigzag like the many streams on a map that merge into fewer creeks and fewer rivers before returning to an infinite sea. Or like the visible branchings of a tree, or the invisible roots, or like the highly excited neurons of an active mind, or like the electromagnetic dream state universe itself. And it would be your job, in keeping with the above metaphors, to pick your way through the maze of possibilities and pitfalls to find your way to the top, or as far as your fuel takes you. Maybe the stable-seeming black pyramid represents the dream state, and the bolt represents the end of illusion, the destruction of the false by the true. The bolt shoots upward because the process of awakening equates to ascension into increased altitude of perspective. If downward like a reverse tarot card, it might signify dissension, entrenchment, compliance, hurdliness, the destruction of human potential. The bolt and amp pyramid interpretation says less about harmony and balance, and more about the introduction of chaos and violent disruption, the loss of stability, the destruction of false order. The black and white in the yin-yang symbol is stark, unyielding, powerful, insistent, whereas in the American Panoscope symbol, it is aggressive, antagonistic, anti-human, further accentuating the bleakness of Joe's corporate work environment, and by extension, his brain cloud life. Of course, that bolt can also be seen as a crack, a fissure, a breaking out of a shell as depicted on the cover of Damnedest. It's an awakening, an emergence, the end of childhood and beginning of adulthood, the death-rebirth event we were meant to undergo at the age of sexual maturity, but we zigged or zagged when we should have gone straight and ended up as just one more caterpillar in a vast swarm. The bolt is a rift, a fracture, a gash, a wound. Something that was once whole is rent in two, not gently but violently, explosively. Broken sounds bad, but in this case it's good. Think of that volcano mountain as the massive and immovable fortification of selfhood, or Maya's impregnable fortress of delusion, now breached, divided against itself, split into two distinct and opposing forces, hatred of false self on one side and fear of no self on the other. Once this first crack appears, the failure of the structure is assured, or so you'd think. That's what all this non-dual shit is really about, reducing everything to those two opposing forces. To paraphrase Abe and JC, a self-divided cannot long stand. That's the point of non-duality, not to create or preserve the structure of self or Maya's palace of delusion, but to dismantle and destroy them. The business of non-duality is deconstruction and demolition. Everyone else in the spiritual sphere may be devoted to creation and preservation, but you and I at Vaitan are doing this other thing. We're busting shit up, burning down the house. We may think during the hill climb portion of this event that the peak is the destination, but it's really just where we can start the real adventure of awakening into our full and right adulthood, and perhaps beyond. Despite what non-dual teachers parked along the slope believe and insist, non-duality is not a path of awakening. It's a return to the launch point we've been heading away from since we were 12. This is all about getting back to square one, which is on top of the hill at the edge of the pipe. That's where childhood ends, and something else, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, begins. Maybe we can say the triangle is a prism, and the bolt is the minor blemish that is unique to you, and the only thing that sets you apart from countless billions of your herdmates. Your only legitimate claim to individuality. The light of mind hits the prism of self, where it is distorted by your unique imperfection, and radiates outward to animate your dream state bubble, in which you are both projector and perceiver. The rest of what makes you you is just a proprietary blend of emotion and intelligence. This icon would need a major overhaul to make that interpretation work, and as Alan Watts was fond of repeating, the game is not worth the candle. Before we declare the red-lined yin-yang as winner, we should sort out the bolt and amp pyramid entry. On the face of it, it's not ideal, especially for a company that specializes in rectal probes. It looks like a cross between a high-voltage hazard and a Klingon suppository, the last thing you want to be inserting anywhere. As an iconographic representation of a supposedly spiritual path, it leaves quite a bit to be desired. But non-duality is not a spiritual path. How can the bolt and pyramid be interpreted? As a big JedVaita A, as a pyramid rent by lightning, as a jagged mountain path, as a fractured highway, as a rectal probe from hell, or as some sort of Nazi insignia? Not great. The image has qualities, but the pros don't outweigh the cons. The simple bolt and pyramid motif has a definite fascisty Gestapo-y air, highly susceptible to grievous misinterpretation. We can spice it up and tone it down a bit by adding a circle and some smoke. This version has a few things going for it non-duality-wise. The schism path leads out of the circle, which represents finiteness, dream state and containment. Not strictly true, but a pretty lie. Clipping the top makes it more volcano-y and less mountainy or pyramid-y. The path is harsh, jagged and unpleasant to behold, and looks like it would be a pain in the arse to travel, which is certainly the case. The wisps of smoke are not harsh, they're softer and suggest equilibrium achieved. That's not what we see in the bigger picture. It gets worse at the top, not better. But that's what the non-dual leg of the journey might look like when isolated. Still, there's something a little too oppressive and totalitarian about this image. It's a little much, and can't be much reduced. Let's stick a sun in there to represent, the sun. Better, worse, worse. Sad to say, but Hollywood had it right. The Nazi-esque bolt and pyramid says it all, and we can't further dial it in or soften it up. Minimalism is the soul of symbology, and we're going in the wrong direction. Maybe a Waponi hula girl would fix it. This version may be suitable as a flag for Waponi Wu, had it not sunk, but it hardly shouts non-duality or simplicity. So we're back to the cancelled yin-yang as the clearest symbolic representation of non-duality. The chief argument against it is that spiritual folk really like the yin-yang symbol and don't want to see it defiled. But maybe that's the chief argument in its favor. The countercultural transgression of it. Anti-harmony? Anti-balance? Anti-duality? What the hell is that about? That's a good question to ask. Non-duality is not just another cheese-dick variant of your mama's Zen or Buddhism or Hinduism. That's not what this is about or where it's going. Non-duality is something separate and apart. It has different rules and goes in a different direction. Why not make that clear from the outset? Why dance around it? Non-duality is not about popularity and big crowds and the weight of consensus. It's about setting out on a cold and lonely solo trek and leaving comfort and companionship and your very humanity behind, just like if it had occurred in its natural time frame when you were 12. No one can do it for you, or help you, or go with you. That's what being an adult means. You're on your own. You can say the yin-yang symbol represents the whole dream state enchilada, which is why we can get so much mileage just by drawing a red line through it. That provides us with a very tidy solution that captures and conveys the entirety of the initial non-dual insight in a light, convenient, go-anywhere package. The yin-yang represents finiteness and two-ness, so the cancelled meaning is unmistakably oneness and infiniteness. It's really truth we're creating a symbol for, and in the dream state, not two is as close as we get. The yin-yang symbol seems to be the clear winner in terms of a generally accepted symbol for dream state reality, the lie. So cancelling it creates the obvious symbol for truth. Who else but non-duality could fly such a banner? The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank you. I have no response to that. Angelica, Joe versus the volcano. Non-duality is dead. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. The tree is more than first a seed, then a stem, then a living trunk, and then dead timber. The tree is a slow, enduring force straining to win the sky. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Non-duality is dead. It's really pretty obvious when you think about it. Most things are. But this is something I've managed not to think about. I'm somewhat conflicted about this. On the one hand, I'm reluctant to make so bold a pronouncement. On the other, it's long overdue. The death of authentic non-duality has long been both impossible and inevitable. Non-duality is about truth, which can never die, but which poses an existential threat to the dream state, on a case-by-case rather than herd-wide basis. So in order for the show to go on, as we're told it must, non-duality must be defeated. It really died years ago, but I've been a little slow on the uptake. I guess it's not dead, just mostly dead, but I don't think it will be springing to its feet and winning Dharma duels anytime soon. These days it seems that every spiritual pretender claims the name non-duality in some altered or diluted form, so the genuine flower has been effectively choked out by weeds that can claim the name but not the beauty. This is the function performed by the minions of Maya, non-dual teachers in this case, who race in with picks and shovels to rebury any glimmer of truth. Actually, non-duality is not dead. It's not only alive and well, but thriving. It's under new management that kept the name and gutted the interior, turning it from an austere minimalist space into a garish carnival attraction. I might be overstating it a bit, but who cares? A little bullshit is the same as a lot, and modern non-duality has a lot more than a little. As with all the many other offerings in Maya's spiritual marketplace, from which it's now indistinguishable, the diamond core is effectively out of sight, and all that remains are the sugary delights. Imagine trying to talk a crazy person into being sane. How would you go about it? By describing sanity to them as if trying to entrain their frequency to your own. Even then, what you describe is just your version of sanity, and who signed off on you. All you know is what some other supposedly sane person told you. It's like the children's game of telephone, in which a message is whispered from person to person, and eventually the original and final versions are compared to the peals of childish laughter. Can you imagine if many people became suddenly convinced that they were insane and needed your help? So there you'd be, describing your idea of sanity, and there are all the insane people soaking up your sanity. And what sense does any of it make except that it describes the state of modern non-duality? The blind leading the blind, the inmates running the asylum, all talk, no walk. The artificial has fully infiltrated, co-opted and displaced the authentic. Game over. What would non-duality look like if we didn't have the internet and only had books for transmission? Much more powerful and lucid, with a cleaner signal-to-noise ratio because it would be mindfully written, not mindlessly blurted. Go back to the 90s, and you'll find that Advaita was esoteric and arcane, even by New Age standards. A handful of authors, mostly Indians, wrote a handful of books, Ramana, Ramesh, Nisargadatta, and a few others as I recall. and that was pretty much the whole field. They were out of tune with what spiritual seekers of the day sought, and to be fair, they all contained their own generous helping of wonky nonsense. Those books were like a freaky little sideshow within a larger freaky sideshow. The non-dual section might have gotten a half a shelf in a dark corner of a store, away from the hot sellers of the week. I don't even know if they still have stores like that. New Age bookstores, they were called. Nowadays, non-duality exists mainly online in the form of videos and chat rooms, which simplifies Maya's job of distorting the sparkle, not the sparkler. One of your first thoughts upon beholding the diamond of truth is that this is not what anyone wants, and you're almost right, almost no one does. Truth, in the dream state, is a very small niche market. Maya is not the goddess of illusion. She's the intelligence of fear. She's not an outside agency, but a part of ourselves, the part that wants desperately to live forever and never change. It's we who bury non-duality under a mountain of emotional rubbish, not some outside contractor or alien overlord or maleficent deity. It's we who will do whatever it takes to not find the only thing that can never be lost, and nurture reconfigures us specifically to perform this seemingly impossible task. Correctly understood, Maya, the goddess of illusion, didn't kill non-duality, we did. And that makes perfect sense. Not two is too scary, too simple, too undeniable, too in your face. It poses an existential threat to the dramatic dream state. It comes down to non-duality or the dream state, so non-duality has to die. Non-duality has devolved into just another cheap New Age flavor of the month, and bears no resemblance to its authentic, diamond-like awesomeness, which remains fully intact. If you enjoy listening to online non-duality teachers, at least use that time productively by practicing your mental swordsmanship. Cut them to pieces, hack them to bits, destroy them utterly, let no trace remain in your view anyway. Sparring dummies is about all they're good for. Teaching non-duality belies an inherent misunderstanding of non-duality. Teachers seem convinced that if they describe the awakened state, their students will wake up. That might be true of whatever trivial epiphany or petty insight they've actually attained, but not of awakening in or from the dream state. I could describe being awake from now till last Thursday, but it wouldn't do anyone any good. Lack of conceptual understanding is not the issue. If you care, and I can't imagine why you would, non-duality might come back into vogue in a few decades or centuries, all else being equal. The diamond core, not two, can't be bent or broken, only buried, and it will always resurface because there's that within us that wants to know the truth and knows where to look. Maybe non-duality will make its big comeback as one-ism or not-nothingism or post-nihilism, but all that really matters in the sense that anything does is you and not two. Any attempt to add to that simple equation is actually an attempt to obfuscate and evade. Maybe we could adopt a new name based on the old, but where does it end? We could rebrand as quantum non-duality, but if we stay true to truth under the new banner, it would soon be swarmed by the Mayan horde, and we'd have to make another jump. Mega non-duality might be next, then omni, quasi, supra, ultra, maxi, and so on. What's next? Anti-plurality? Radical unity? Hyper-singularity? That could get pretty embarrassing if we weren't already at peak embarrassment. But why do we need a name at all? I'm on my desert planet, and you're on yours. Call it Waponi Woo if you need a name. Waponi-ism, Wapanism. Or we can call it Alitheology or JedVaita or Armageddon, doesn't matter. All that does matter is the diamond core, aka not two. This whole deal is just about the relationship between you and not two. There's nothing else to it, and anyone who tells you there is. Love, peace, happiness, compassion, or God, for instance, is talking with intent to distract and delude. Just worry about getting up the hill and down the pipe. Then, if you still care about that other stuff, go for it. The dream state is your oyster. Non-duality is not a destination. It's one leg of a larger journey. It's like a desert motel. Don't settle in. Don't get comfortable. Stay nimble and mobile. It's not a belief system, it's a phase. You're only here for a short while, then you move on, and never have to think about it again. I'm kinda stuck haunting the motel due to my pattern, but you should be passing through and pressing on. The only benefit of understanding what non-duality has become is to avoid falling into the trap of setting down roots prematurely. To maintain the open independence of your seas, just do what you should have been doing all along. Keep your eye on the diamond core. That thing you saw when you underwent the initial non-dual insight. Don't drift or sprawl or expand, keep it tight. Not two is your pair of ruby slippers. You had the power to return to your authentic state all along. Remain steadily focused on that, and you can't go wrong. The good news I promised is that the state of modern non-duality needn't concern you. If you're sincere, you don't care where the crowd goes, and if you're not, you just go with them. If you believe you're sincere but suspect you're getting played, this might be a good time to sit down with map and compass to check course and heading. What do we do now? Good question. But who do we mean by we? As for me, I'll keep doing what I do because I don't care where the crowd goes. I have a simple function to perform, come rain or shine. As for you, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is the same as it ever was. Where the non-dual herd goes does not concern you, only where you go. You are a herd of one making a solo trek. The fact that non-duality has fallen into Maya's hands doesn't change a thing. Think for yourself and let the rest go. At the end of the day, that's the only advice I have to give. Trust no one but yourself, and nothing except your own power of reason. Not your mom or your priest or guru or any book, and especially not your heart. Your feelings are not your own. They were implanted by enemies when you were too young to resist. But now you've achieved the age of majority, and you can fend for yourself. Your most dangerous enemy is the false ally, so choose your friends wisely. It's your own most trusted and relied upon resources that will lead you astray and drag you down. If you like wallowing in ignorance, then change nothing. But if you want to crawl out of the sewer and up into the warmth and light of the sun, you'll need to find a better class of friend, or better yet, no friends, just stony resolve and clear-eyed self-reliance. That entails reason, not feelings. And to benefit from reason, you must learn how to use it, like eyes you've never opened, or a sword you've never swung. If non-duality was a starship and I was the captain, this is where we'd realize the ship's been overrun by the Borg. I'd initiate the self-destruct sequence and find a way to quietly inform my fellow shipmates that it's time to hop in the escape pods and abandon ship. Obviously, in this scenario, the Borg would cancel the self-destruct sequence and seize the ship like the naughty little space pirates they are, but maybe some of us would get away. So that's what I'm doing, quietly informing you, shipmate, that it's time to go. Find a pod, strap in, press the big red button and hope for the best. Take not two and leave the rest. The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank you. The hardest assumption to challenge is the one you don't even know you are making. Douglas Adams. Jerry, Chuck and Joe. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com. Read by Cornelia McFeely. Del, Jeremiah. Maybe you best go down to a town. Get out of these mountains. Jeremiah. I've been to a town, Del. Jeremiah Johnson, 1972. Try to picture Sigma male. Jeremiah Johnson being taken out of the mountains and inserted into the modern bureaucratic nightmare for a month. Sitting, waiting, taking a number, smiling, making nice, providing samples and documents, trapped for endless hours in diabolical voicemail systems designed to break the will and crush the spirit, getting bounced around and referred and transferred, decrypting coverage, debating deductibles and co-pays, scratching the thin veneer of human politeness to reveal the pitiless corporate machinery beneath, being subjected to on-hold music and waiting room TV, suffering the slings and arrows of minor indignities and petty injustices, reshaped to fit the pipes through which he's being pushed and pulled, and in the end, submitting to this banal horror, because at some point all he'll want is to come out the other end and get away from the whole anti-human shit show. That's what a modern-day Jeremiah Johnson would mean by, "I've been to a town." Not that he's seen war, corruption, debauchery and human frailty, which are fairly part of the game, but that he's been ground to a nub under the weight of the bureaucratic machine which marks the fall of the common man and the rise of the bean counter. That's what can make a normal, healthy, reasonable person walk into the mountains and never look back. Freezing, starving, fighting relentless and remorseless enemies, forgoing human companionship, and a total lack of celebrity gossip would be a small price to pay to reclaim one's self-sovereignty. No one wants to go off into the mountains, but if that's the price of an honest life, maybe some of us would. We could just as well make it any of a number of movie characters portrayed by cinematic stoics like John Wayne, Lee Marvin, Clint Eastwood and others. But Jeremiah Johnson seems tailored to fit this valid, but seldom seen archetype. He doesn't just walk into the mountains and instantly fulfill the archetypal ideal, but by the final credits, he does. Perhaps at the beginning, before we meet him, he has undergone, for reasons unknown, the transition from child to adult, and the movie follows him as he goes through those early and awkward years, eventually culminating in the rare being he becomes by the end. It's really his process of becoming that the movie's about. He wouldn't go through the modern bureaucratic ringer, because he personifies the archetype of the man who wouldn't. That's the point of Jeremiah Johnson. He's the guy, real or imagined, that doesn't put up with that shit. He doesn't turn his head and cough for anyone, much less stand around with his ass hanging out of a disposable gown speckled with pretty little penguins. Jeremiah Johnson doesn't sit in a crowded waiting room with 100 others, while a staticky TV with a blown speaker blares a message of docility, obedience and consumerism. He has given up everything in exchange for his simple human dignity and personal sovereignty, and that's so rare we wouldn't know it if we saw it, which we probably wouldn't. When it's JJ's time to go, he'll lean against a tree and pin a note to his coat, bequeathing his rifle to whoever finds his body. The only answer to man-made systems is to stay out of them, but that's not always possible. Sometimes you have to fly. Sometimes you need medical assistance. Sometimes a tree falls on your truck. When something like that happens, you're drawn into this system of petty tyrants and creepy, crappy people with whom you must match pretense or risk becoming lost in their corporate plumbing and prolonging an already insufferable experience. When it's just a matter of health or money, you can walk away and let it go. But if it's the justice system or government, that may not be so easy. We see that when the government gets their hooks into Jeremiah's life and trashes it, but maybe when it's over, he's secretly glad they did. He would not have wished his not wife and not son dead, but he has returned to pattern alignment and neutral buoyancy, so he'd be secretly glad they're gone. Funny how things work out. Jon Krakauer's book, Into the Wild, is about the human impulse to get away and live apart. How do you do it? Where do you go? What do you do? Why are you really doing it? Are you being drawn into mountains or repelled by towns? Is there anyone who can guide and advise you? Or do you just make it up as you go and learn everything the hard way? On the one hand, you see the herd game and you don't want to be a part of it or live among its players. On the other, you might feel some sort of kinship or call of nature. Between those two, you get the idea that you gotta go, but go where? Go how? Do what? Krakauer's book, as I recall, mentions a few such ascetic-type nomads, himself included, while following the story of one, the main character, who dies while living in an abandoned school bus in the Alaskan wilderness from accidental self-poisoning. What's a little sad is that this person was obeying a healthy and authentic human impulse, but finds no guidance in understanding or obeying it. All this guy knew was that he had to get out of the herd, but didn't know what that meant, why he wanted it or how to do it. That could easily be any sincere seeker. That might have been my story, but I had ample fuel, a specific point of grievance, and somewhere better than a school bus to process it. 3 related but seldom seen archetypes in this category are Jeremiah Johnson, Chuck Noland, and Joe Banks. Viewed within the waterline metaphor, Jeremiah is totally out to sea, Chuck is totally addicted to land, and Joe is just past the waterline, far enough to enjoy smooth seas, near enough to venture inland as needed, or so we suppose. The last we see of him, he and new bride Patricia are heading away from the things of man, which I interpret to mean across the river and up the hill, beyond the waterline but not totally out to sea. Which archetype, Jerry, Chuck or Joe, you'll be as an adult is not for you to say, but I'll just go ahead and tell you. It's Joe, assuming that is, that by away from the things of man, he meant just outside the herd. In other words, in the world but not of the world. Are there any Jeremiah Johnsons in the world today? If there are, how would we know unless they have their own film crews and reality shows, which does not really fit the archetype? What I find is that the self-born person must stay within eyesight and earshot of the herd. That's the Goldilocks solution, not too near, not too far. Across the river and up the hill from your tribe seems to be the sweet spot. Then, when you do have to go down the hill and across the river and back to your tribe, to file a claim or claim your benefits, or pick up some good barbecue, no one even knows you're from a different archetype. When you're in the herd, you're one of the herd. But it's always a good idea to keep your head down, eyes open and mouth shut. Maybe people like Jeremiah Johnson do exist, and maybe they'd rather die than come back to a town for help or supplies, or to replace a crushed mule. I suppose there are such people, but if there are, then being far out to sea and never returning to land is their main theme, so I guess we don't see much of them. Fierce independence and self-reliance are not my main themes. Exploration and expression are, and although I'm out to sea, I remain close to shore. Sometimes I drift too far out or too far in, but I'm usually able to maintain a comfortable distance pretty effortlessly. Waking up in or from the dream state won't make you the enemy of Maya, emotion or humanity. You'll still be a person here in Maya's palace of delusion, with all that entails, except with an altered set of human recipe proportions. When we adjust one setting, all other settings are affected. Being slightly mind-dominant is orders of magnitude different from being 24-to-1 heart-dominant. By turning that one dial, all your other dials will update, so you won't be an altered person, but a different person in a different world, just as a butterfly is a different being in a different world from its former caterpillar self. That's what's really at stake with all this spirituality stuff. It's really about restoring your default settings, because your dials were maladjusted by some formative non-self force. They turned you into one of them, but now you want to turn back into you. Once you've gotten back to where you're meant to be, then you can make whatever adjustments authentically suit you, now operating from the natural perspective of a self-born adult, instead of the man-made perspective of an other-born child. No one is telling you what you'll see or what you'll be, only that what you are now has nothing to do with you, and that situation can be remedied. In order to become what you are, you must first unbecome what you're not. That's where it gets tricky. That's the part everyone wants to ignore. Chuck fought against change, Jerry and Joe fought for it. No one is happy at the waterline. That's the worst of both worlds. The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank you. Lap, you've come far, pilgrim. Johnson, feels like far. Lap, were it worth the trouble? Johnson, what trouble? Jeremiah Johnson, 1972. Non-dual adjacent. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. I dream of a better tomorrow, where chickens can cross the road and not be questioned about their motives. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Within the range of topics I write about, my least favorite is non-dual teachers. It just feels tacky and underhanded, as if I'm trying to play myself up by playing down my competitors. To be clear, I do not consider myself a non-duality teacher because there's no non-dual teaching, and my only competition is myself. I produce my unique fruit for whoever wants it. Everyone, no matter. As per Krishna, I act, but I don't reflect on the fruit of the act. I haven't watched non-dual teacher videos for a long time, but recently I got stuck waiting for something somewhere, so I took the opportunity to revisit this arena. The first thing I discovered is that my patience is really growing thin. When you're looking for a bowling ball in a fishbowl, it doesn't take long to see it's not there. How long do you have to listen to someone before you know they're not speaking your language? I don't mean to diminish anyone's experience. I'm just saying that experience has nothing to do with waking up. If you want to talk about your experience, you must first prove that you exist. When you find you can't, you've made progress. On the whole, I consider this an unpleasant but necessary subject, like parents might view the birds and bees talk. One reason I might be reluctant is because this subject might be of more interest to me than you. If that's the case, I have good news for me. I forgive myself. I write about what's interesting to me in the hope that it's interesting to you too. By interesting, I mean fun or amusing or of the moment or challenging or confounding. If I were analyzing world events as they unfold, I would be driven by the headlines of the day, but non-dual headlines are in short supply. Swami What's-His-Name died 19 years ago today. Guru What's-Her-Name is a closet chocoholic. Shri Shri Shri, someone has been awarded their 4th Shri, etc. Hardly the stuff of a bustling newsroom. If this topic is of no interest to you, find one you like better. For my part, I recently watched some teacher videos, so that's what I'm writing about. I should also mention that when it comes to this topic, I'm mostly talking out my arse. But even if I'm wrong in the details, I'm right in the broad strokes. So again, I forgive myself. I just went back and watched some more videos to make sure I wasn't overdoing it on the ass talk. But alas, if anything, I'm understating the matter. It's actually a little scary. Talks, meetups, retreats, et al. Are all in the same family of safely non-productive time killers. The goal at this level is not to go to the next, but to not go to the next. Folks engaged in these idle pastimes make up the majority of non-dualists, and perpetual stagnation is their reward. What I advocate is frequently mislabeled radical non-duality, suggesting that the talk therapy version is regular, non-radical non-duality. This is not a valid distinction. What's the non-radical version of nuclear war? There is only one non-duality, no types or versions or variants. Non-duality is not just another path or teaching or system. There's nothing to talk about or learn about, only start climbing or don't. There's only ever one question that matters, which only you can know, and only you can answer. And the answer is always the destruction of the question, elimination through illumination. So what's to talk about? Because the parking lot is where you can safely expend the dangerous energy of the initial non-dual insight, where you can burn off fuel or take on ballast. Do your time, enjoy your stay, get it out of your system and go away. Or take up permanent residence in the parking lot, why not? The parking lot serves as a built-in vetting process, and frankly, those who continue upward, we merry few, should be glad that so few do. Once you're past the trailhead, it's strictly a solo journey, and the parking lot crowd didn't sign up for that. There are two very different emotional dynamics at work here. If you like the non-duality of the parking lot, you're going to hate the cold, lonely, brutal trek up the slope, and even if there was an easier way to the top, the news up there is not all warm and fuzzy either. The parking lot area may seem like a trap, but maybe it's just a catch basin that collects those who had no fuel to go further anyway. Those who find peace in the parking lot seem well suited to that situation. Where they are is where they want to be and where they belong, so it's not really a trap, so much as just another level. People pause and dig in at every point along the way, so why should the parking lot be any different? Maybe the folks down there aren't victims of Maya's fiendish skullduggery. Maybe they just went as far as they wanted to go. The point is not to condemn anyone. Wrongness is not possible, and nothing is other than it should be. If these particular actors weren't playing those particular roles, others would step in. My concern has more to do with helping you avoid the traps that Maya is prepared to spring. These traps often contain soporific agents, so we don't just fall into them, we settle into them. Game over. So I spent some time checking out a bunch of videos by a bunch of non-dual influencers, ranging from new faces to the usual suspects. Many teachers are more knowledgeable about non-duality than me, and many are a lot smarter than me. But this is a war, not a quiz. You don't want classroom masters or game theory experts when you're in the shit. You want that little bastard within who's screaming for your attention, but is too drowned out by emotional overburden to make himself heard. He's your only real friend in this mess. I have a dozen or so online teachers that I can't bear to watch, another dozen I grudgingly enjoy, and a dozen I don't dislike but who never have fresh material. There are several dozen familiar faces and many more new or unfamiliar. I click on a random video, go to a random midpoint, listen a bit, jump around a bit and move on. Sometimes I linger longer in the hope of discovering a new term or metaphor so as to become a more effective guide myself, but I can't remember the last time that happened. There are many readily visible indicators of how far upslope any given person has or hasn't gone, but sometimes I like to listen for a while regardless, and I usually leave a thumbs up before clicking away to remind myself that teachers are not just deceivers, they're also deceived. Such videos are my only exposure to the non-dual community, if there is such a thing. I've never checked out forums or chat groups or telegrams or discords or anything like that. I hear they can be a little snarky. What's that about? I might have gone on CompuServe or a BBS back in dial-up days to find ways to speed up my 56K modem, but not much since. Despite being out of touch with whatever non-dual community there may be, I have a very good idea of where the best-known teachers are located on this terrain. They're not always the highest altitude-wise, but they are the most prominent. This is where a touchy subject gets touchier. The biggest names in non-duality are usually not the most accurate and experienced guides. They are frequently surpassed by newcomers and no-names who reach a smaller audience with a more lucid message. My advice: be your own guru. We might think we can benefit from anyone above us, but whatever got them stuck was baked into their mindset from the outset, and will get you stuck too. I certainly understand the appeal of these video teachers. Of course they're appealing. But the message and method they often promote is a subtle misrepresentation of authentic diamond bullet non-duality. The best lies are mostly true. For example, some teachers believe their students are simply failing to see the obvious, as if seeing the obvious was the path to awakening. That sounds right, but it's not. It's not a corporate tagline like they make it sound. Just do it. Just look. Just wake up. Seeing what is may be the end result, but unseeing what's not is how we get there. That's the hellish part we're all desperate to avoid. To see the true, we must unsee the untrue, and that doesn't come from the pretty platitudes of shiny, happy teachers. It comes from going through hell. Sorry. Why anyone is drawn to non-duality in the first place is a mystery. Those coming for the right reason probably never even slow down for the parking lot. Sell the house, sell the car, sell the kids. At the heart of the failed search is false motivation. Desire never wins this war. All desire is egoic, and ego can only get you so far. You have to make it out of the herd, up the slope and down the pipe. Until you step into the pipe, you still enjoy the illusion of agency and can still be diverted. The most compelling diverters are nearest the top. They are Maya's best and last line of defense. But once you take that final and first step, you leave Maya and non-duality forever behind. Once you experience the initial non-dual insight, the learning part is over and the doing part begins. The initial non-dual insight is what Krishna shows Arjuna in the Gita. Once Arjuna sees what he's being shown, that's it. There's nothing else to say or show, and the only thing left to do is blow the horn and launch the war. Time to kill everyone and destroy everything you love. Too bad, so sad. Whence springs this inglorious weakness, shameful to the brave? Time to stand up and fight. I'm struggling not to call most non-dual teachers demons and minions of Maya, but if you understand what demons really are, pernicious thwarters, turners of trail signs, purveyors of shiny baubles, toothy ass-biters, then it's hard to escape the conclusion that that's what most non-dual teachers are, Maya's mouthpieces. They're not just demons in this sense, they're pretty good demons, Maya's A-team, her most appealing and least demon-seeming, the ones we most want to embrace because they look, act and talk most like us. Maya hath power to assume a pleasing shape, and the most effective demons don't look like demons and don't know they are. By that logic, maybe I'm a demon too. That would be a fun twist. Non-duality is like pounding a wooden stake through your own heart. How do you sell that? How do you convince someone it's for their own good? You don't. You make yourself available, misrepresent yourself as little as possible, and wait for the craziest people in creation to come to you for what little guidance you can provide. If you want happiness and success in the non-dual arena as a teacher or guide or expert, you don't want to be in non-duality itself. You want to be non-dual adjacent, and that's where the parking lot is and most non-dualists are. Non-duality is very simple. The entire teaching is contained in the term not to. That's the knowing part, the rest is the doing part. The whole point of the party in the parking lot is to transfer the emphasis safely away from action and back to theory, as in, do you prefer your dessert with whipped cream or ground glass? What kind of dipshit chooses ground glass? My kind, I suppose. The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank you. What is non-duality? Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Vivere veneversum vivus vici. By the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe. V for vendetta. Non-duality is the coolest thing in this or any other universe, so why hide its light under a bushel? Non-duality is peak human philosophy and peak human spirituality. It is the giant killer of science and religion, of the dream state universe and self itself. It is Pashupata, the thought that destroys the universe. Non-duality has no equal and no superior. It is unrivaled and incontestable, sui generis and non-pareil. There's not even a runner-up or also ran. Non-duality dominates its field because it's the only thing in the field. Non-duality is how we escape from delusion. All else is about being content within it. Everything in the dream state is a deception with one exception. Non-duality is the royal road to awakening in or from the dream state. So that's pretty cool. Truth is the diamond core to which all else is mud, slush and alluvium. Non-duality is not truth. It is how we can eliminate untruth from our hearts and minds so truth may be revealed. Non-duality is the only method by which truth can be unearthed, because it's our only word for unearthing the truth. We very few have discovered a path to truth realization called Advaita. Not because it's the one true path, but because there's only one true path and we call it Advaita. We could call it chlamydia, that's a pretty name but might lead to some confusion. Truth is the sun around which the dream state orbits, near too close, near too far. Out of all the herd, spiritual seekers may be closest to truth, but they're not getting any closer, just going around. Closest of all, but still prior to the event horizon, are the Ninos, non-dualists in name only. They are in a stable, non-degrading orbit and happy where they are. They may think of themselves as seekers, but they're most often finders, not of truth or adulthood, but of tolerable contentment. They found what they want and want to be where they are. The parking lot is an area through which the serious-minded must pass, so our thoughts go out to them. At that stage, prayer, perseverance, and plenty of fuel are determining factors. To answer my own question, the reason to keep non-duality under wraps is because there's no reason to talk about it, and plenty of reason not to. This isn't a religion, it needs no proselytization or promotion. It has no bullshit bodhisattva component. The part of you that wants to go participate in the public side is the part of you that wants to maintain a safe distance. And that's very doable, because that's what Maya has managed to do with this operation. So the next thing you know, you're watching online videos and attending group events, and you've settled into a nice, safe rut from where you can claim the name without playing the game. Non-duality, however, is not a spectator or audience participation sport. It's entirely between you and not to. When I was coming up, my personal version of not to was truth exists. That was the diamond bullet that blew my mind to smithereens. I could have called it broomstick or paddleboat or Herbert, but truth exists performed the same self-contained teaching function for me as not to can for you. You can call it Christ if you want. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto awakening but by me. But the advantage of the term not to is that it tells a story, and you know the whole story just from knowing the term. What matters is what it is, and what it is the shoveling of a lot of shit until some non-shit is exposed. Happily and handily, the only thing that's not shit in the dream state is truth. Remove the former, find the latter. How awesome is that? Compare this, which can't not work, to meditation and a million other Mayan modalities, which never can work. And behold the horror and joy of non-duality. How can we level such a damning blanket indictment against all the great religions and spiritual teachings of mankind? Because we're not total idiots. Okay, strike that. Not nice. It's probably important not to yield to knee-jerk impulses for some reason. Spiritual correctness, I suppose. We can level that damning indictment because non-duality is not just the shortest path between dream state and truth. It's the only path. I could name a dozen well-respected paths on the inhale and expose them as frauds and imposters on the exhale. And you can know it's true, not because you believe anything I say, but because you have experienced the initial non-dual insight, so you've exposed the lies for yourself. The truth is one, awareness. But to get to it, we must first remove the untrue appearance. No other way, no way around it. Non-duality does not require the process of spiritual autolysis. If a pill came out tomorrow that granted you instant access to truth, that would become the new method of choice. But for now, getting the thought process out of Maya's domain by externalizing it is the best we can do. Second best is probably meditation, Scientology, or line dancing, if that tells you anything. There is no other system of awakening in or from the dream state. Truth is the cry of all, said George Berkeley, but the game of few. This is your one and only ticket out of delusion. Everything else is just a variation of tunneling from one part of the prison to another. Maybe something can be accomplished through intensive verbalization or protracted psychoanalysis, but I wouldn't bet my toenail clippings on it. Notice that, for all our talk about non-duality, we're not saying much about non-duality itself. We're talking around it, but not about it. If this were any spiritual teaching or religious doctrine, we could talk about it forever. But about non-duality, there's simply nothing to say. We don't need daily infusions of scripture or weekly pep rallies. We don't need fancy buildings and costumes. We don't need sages and scholars, saviors and saints. All we need is those two little words or just a yin-yang symbol with a red line through it if you're too busy to read. Non-duality is not a school or a doctrine or a discipline. It has no teachers because there's nothing to teach. The two-word term not to is in and of itself the full extent of non-duality. After that, it's just a matter of figuring out what those two words really mean. That's what the initial non-dual insight is. That moment when the truth of not to clicks in your head and sinks its teeth into you like a rabid badger. It's normal and natural that we'd seek to know more, to locate the recognized experts, to see what they say and seek what they sought, maybe hunker down into our own non-degrading orbit. But there is nothing more to know or learn or understand. If you're not into truth, then the dream state is your oyster. But if you are, then non-duality is the only game in town. Non-duality is not about truth, but removing the mental emotional overburden that divides you from your true nature. The minor seeming initial non-dual insight was the whole deal. The rest is just a matter of applying it to everything you think you believe and believe you know, to see what's left when you're done. There's no bodhisattva bullshit in the mix, no cheese dick altruism, no higher good or grander scheme, no silver trophy or pot of gold or choir of angels. Whether you do it or not doesn't matter, and the only one who cares is you. The search for truth is just another idle pastime in the dream state. To suggest that it's any better than anything else is an attempt to introduce a false narrative. Non-duality is just another game in an endless amusement park. Why you're here messing around with all this is the one question you should answer before all others. How serious are you about non-duality? Why are you playing our game? Toward what do you aspire? From what do you flee? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why do mirrors reverse left-right but not up-down? In the sense that you get any say in the matter, I suggest you set your sights on adulthood, not enlightenment. But if you can, why not just drop the whole thing? Go watch the online videos of non-dual teachers. That's the real purpose they serve. Like one of those runaway truck ramps on a downhill stretch of highway. You lose your brakes and start hurtling out of control, so you veer off onto one of those deep sand up-ramps and come safely to a stop. Disaster averted, life goes on. It's always tempting to poke a little fun at non-duality teachers. But when your brakes blow out and doom races toward you, you'll be glad they're there. That's why Maya, the intelligence of fear, installed them. As Gandhi said, there is no God higher than truth, but truth, the absence of falsehood, is of no practical value in the wholly false dream state. The only benefit of removing a white-hot steel splinter from your brain is not having a white-hot steel splinter in your brain anymore. Spirituality, religion, science, mathematics, and law are not true, but they do have great practical value here in the dream state. Truth has nothing to do with anything and nothing to recommend it, especially given the ruinous expense of finding it. I myself, for instance, am very happy with my life, but by normal human dream state standards I don't even have a life. C'est la vie. The end. Article by Jed McKenna, JedVaita.com, read by Cornelia McFeely. Visit wisefoolpress.com to learn more about the books of Jed McKenna in print, ebook and audio formats. Thank you. Do not believe a thing because you have read about it in a book. Do not believe a thing because another man has said it was true. Do not believe in words because they are hallowed by tradition. Find out the truth for yourself. Reason it out. That is realization. Swami Vivekananda.